created my own little algorithms to do one thing or another, like disease states, a mortality algorithm. And
I think you will have a whole levels of robotics, the humanoid robots or non-humanoid robots, whatever the case is.
But the one that I really gravitated towards was Alteryx. Low code, no code, business intelligence stuff, data science, machine learning, things like that.
Audio, or text, and then there's big metaverse bug. Everybody knows the metaverse.
Another week of AI.
All right. I wish Lucky was here to do the AI part, but
Is that him?
Let's see if he's, yeah. Oh man, looks frozen, but oh, there he is. Maybe he can do AI.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes, but from Mars.
Really?
It's okay. We can hear you.
Am I choppy?
Choppy, yeah, frozen, yeah. Keep working at it. Maybe it'll work. But yeah, welcome to everybody on the live stream of AI. Lucky is working through his mic and camera. Let's see if that comes online. But today, we're going to talk a lot about business opportunities and business risk. The reason we want to start with business opportunities is because that's what gets people to start making decisions. And as you're making those decisions, what are some of those risks associated with it is the goal of this conversation. So with us, we got to have the professionals, right? We will talk about each of our background. But before I do that, I kind of want to just identify what's the motivation behind doing this podcast, right? Our fifth year in going into the podcasting, we are expanding now from what we started. What we started off is for the military veterans that are transitioning out, for them to understand impact of AI, so that way they can start making decisions about AI, either to change career or use AI for their career, right? There's lots of opportunity in the AI space because the workforce is shifting, right? And military veterans that are transitioning out, people that are already doing some jobs, they're transitioning into another job. The workforce is changing, right? So in the fifth year of this podcast, we're looking to really make this podcast about the workforce, the total of the workforce, people that are making decisions about their career, people that are making decisions about their businesses to adopt AI or strategy that they want to build so that way they can be successful in their startups, right? So that's the motivation. Like, we really want to have people that are interested in AI, that are asking questions about AI. How do we help them make a good decisions and help them to capture those business opportunities, but do it in a smart way so they can manage those risks down the road? Because another name for business is risk. Another name for job is a risk. Job change is a risk. Everything is a risk. Like, whole life is a risk. So I'm going to read off what I have found out about Julian, which is, I've known Julian for a very long time, but I just didn't know all the stuff. So today I wrote it down to, kind of read it off about Julian. So Julian is the CEO of Sabio Technical Solutions, where him and his team works with the intersection of the federal contracting, unmanned systems, and emerging technology, right? Delivering their professional services for those topics. So they're in a B2B space, right? And of course B2G. And he's also helping organization operationalize AI, and hence he's here operationalizing AI with compliance and operational constraint of the federal environment, right? We're going to have to talk a lot about compliance, the GRCs, because Julian is here and he's the guy that we're going to leverage to answer those questions. And then we have Dr. Hitchcock, right? So he works with CEOs and leadership to clarify their market strategy, their marketing strategy, to strengthen their business models and build the leadership and operational capabilities that is required to win and deliver those federal contracts. So depth of knowledge here is going to be packed today, but we only got 45 minutes to an hour. So we will try to make it work as much as we can. But before we do that, let's check in with Lucky. Are you frozen, Lucky? I think you are frozen.
I don't know. Am I?
Yeah, it's frozen. You're standing like a statue. Turn the camera off, Lucky. I think we can do just the audio. That's fine. So, Julian, want to go ahead and introduce yourself because I think you have a fascinating role in everywhere you go. But please, let us know who you are and what it is that you do.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Well, hey, appreciate you having us on. Very excited to spend a couple of minutes talking about all the different facets of this AI paradigm that we've all entered over the past couple of years. Kind of how you said, we're actually doing it, right? So we're not academic, we're not theoretical, we're not a vendor, we don't have any particular tools that we promote. As we are practitioners of this, both in the federal contracting space and then supporting other business owners, both from, hey, how do we get started, to, hey, how do we maximize our workflows? How do we facilitate some of the compliance? Because it's, government's getting a little bit more complicated with compliance with CMMC and some of the new regulations that are coming out. So I'm pretty excited because a lot of stuff we'll talk about tonight. Again, it's not hypothetical. It's, hey, these are small little wins that we can use as, small business owners, family-owned business owners, to leverage, to use and win and compete against some of the larger companies and then be able to win against them.
Absolutely. All right, Dr. Hitchcock.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be on your podcast. So, as we kind of previously discussed, I've been in this space for a little over 15 years or so, and kind of where I sit in the space is helping companies, as you kind of mentioned, scale within the federal government contracting space. I sit at the intersection between the Apex Accelerators and SCORE, and I'll talk a little bit about SCORE here for a couple of seconds. SCORE is really a mentorship organization. There's over 10,000 volunteer mentors nationwide that works with small businesses from the very inception of an idea to helping them scale within whatever market they might be operating in. And so, our mentors spend a whole lot of time working with entrepreneurs, providing them with free resources, whether tools, templates, access to folks that have backgrounds in whether it's technology, finance, real estate, you name it. They cross the spectrum, construction, et cetera. So if there's folks out there who are looking to start a company or already have a company that is having difficulties or not having difficulties and are trying to figure out how to scale in the particular space that they're in, I would encourage you to reach out to your local SCORE mentors for guidance and assistance. If you're looking at getting into federal government contracting, your Apex Accelerators, those are the places where you really need to link into. They're great connectors. They can connect you not only with local resources, but also with national resources to really help you understand the complexities that are involved within federal government contracting. The environment, as we've talked about, is changing with not just the new AI tools that are coming on board, but we also have political, economic, social, legal changes that are coming throughout the entire system today. And those changes are all going to impact our businesses. Over the last 5 or 6 years, part of my studies was looking at the future and figuring out where those impacts that are coming down the pipeline are going to impact organizations, impact individuals, and impact society at large. So great conversation. Looking forward to having this with you all tonight. So I think we're going to break some new ground here.
Yeah, no, I think you already set us up for success because you mentioned PESTEL, right? PESTL.
Yep.
So this is the type of discussions that you cannot have if you're busy with AI tools. You cannot have this conversation if you're just following the hype, right? Because this is that sort of like step back and ask yourself the right question, right? Can you make those questions to a point that you can start making decisions today? I think that's just the way I've been framing it, right? Because you can look at an analysis for other people and you have to do the analysis for yourself. Now, if you've done that analysis, one of the things that you probably will get better at is how to ask those questions, right? Because right now we are asking a lot of questions, but those questions doesn't necessarily go into decision making, right? And I don't know how to exactly frame it, But if you're not moving fast enough, and if you're feeling slow, that means you are really slow, right? Like if you haven't done anything, if you're not moving with these things that people are doing in their businesses, you are moving slow. However, some people have the impression that they are moving fast because they say, yeah, we're doing AI, right? Like, okay, now tell me the rest of the phrase here. Tell me the rest of the sentence. Like, what does that mean to do AI? How do you do AI? I don't know that. I think I use AI. That's different than, doing AI, because if you're doing AI, to me, it kind of like implies that, you actually have the full infrastructure, right? You own that AI. You actually do things with the AI that you own, right? So there's different sentiment, but I think if you're feeling slow, you are actually going slow, because there's a lot of things that are shifting behind the scene that we can't see. Kind of like for the last 30 years, things haven't really changed that rapidly, but this time things are changing so rapidly, right? It's kind of going in a single stream of direction where this is like, this is data, this is more data, keep feeding that data, and then do some more with it, right? So this kind of shift that I don't think a lot of people are accustomed to. Like even for me, being in this is my 10th year in the AI space, I feel almost left out in a lot of the times, right? Like, say for example, these tools that I used to use 10 years ago are no longer relevant, right? No longer relevant as in there's so many other tools similar to what PyTorch is, right? Remember PyTorch? If you guys didn't know PyTorch, like, use that tool for 10 years. It's so matured. It is so, flexible to use, but there's so many other competition for it, right? Now you're scrambling your thing like, what tool am I supposed to use? But again, I started off with saying the tools are the problems. If you get focused on the tools, you started slowing down. You started thinking like, tool to tool, right? And like things changes. That's how you move, rather than have a strategy to step back and say, have I done my analysis and am I asking the right questions?
So, and that's a great point, right? Because like you said, most small business owners are so consumed in the day-to-day business, right? You're running everything from HR to the back office, finances, getting invoices done. Not only that, if you're in the GovCon space, you're doing proposals, pricing, staffing, you know, name it, right?
Yeah.
We're doing all of it. And to your point, right, when we start the question with, hey, what AI tool do I buy? We're starting with the wrong question, right? Because just take a look at over the past, 6 months, 12 months, 18, 24, 36, it was, oh man, Gemini, X, Microsoft Copilot. And then now you probably have at least 100 automation tools, right? You've got RPA, you've got new AI tools, DeepSeek, Perplexity, the list goes on and on and on. So the right question is, hey, as a business owner, where am I losing time? Where am I losing efficiencies? Where am I losing money that I can start implementing some of these tools? And then it goes back to, okay, what type of tools are the ones that can kind of help get me to what I'm trying to achieve? And I know that's always for small business owners with limited bandwidth, limited time. It's like, hey, how quickly can I get to the answer, right? How quickly can I get that win? But sometimes, like you mentioned, you got to take a step back and say, hang on, what am I really trying to get to? What are the right questions? What is my bottleneck? Is it the proposal throughput? Is it compliance? Because I'll tell you what, CMMC, that's about to start having a huge impact, both from a personnel perspective as well as an impact on the industrial base, with people that need to become CMMC compliant over the next 12 to 18, 24 months.
Yeah, I think though, and I think Asif mentioned it before, right? When I mentioned the idea of pest flow, right? The political, economic, social, technological, and legal changes. That's where you really have to back up, right? I mean, if you back out over, go back 5-10 years, I mean, we knew that the changes that were coming down the pike, there were going to be cybersecurity changes, right? Challenges. And we know today that based on what is the major change that we're seeing in the environment today? It's the acceleration of change. It's not, change has always been there, but it's how fast change is taking place now, right? So if your organization isn't structured and prepared to be rapidly changing, you're probably going to be behind the 8 ball, right? But that doesn't mean you have to be ready for everything that's going to change in the environment, right? You got to step back, take a look at that overall framework, and identify those things that you think you're going to see are the greatest risk to your organization that are changing on the horizon, right? There's a whole methodology, steeped in strategic foresight that kind of helps you do that. It helps you take a look at those trends, those indicators, those weak signals that are out in the external environment, and to map that to your organization so you can identify where some of that risk actually sits. And I think, all too often as business owners, we're really into the day-to-day. We're chasing the next tool without really sitting back and saying, hey, we're finding some changes that are coming down the pipeline and these things are going to happen. I was talking to an organization 3 years ago, and I said, look, this whole thing with, some of these set-aside programs, they're going to be at risk. How did you know? You can look at the social indicators to see that these things weren't very long for the taking, right? But if your business was set up where you're relying on those sort of set-asides, you're putting your business at risk. Now, you had a 3 to 5 year head start where you can start weaning yourself off of some of that, but not seeing those indicators, you're kind of flying blind. So I think, we had a conversation earlier about, what is the role of the CEO? That's what the CEO gets paid for. The CEO gets paid to look out on the horizon to identify some of those risks, while at the same time identifying those opportunities as they emerge in the marketplace.
Yeah, and I'm going to lose everybody if I start talking about tools, right? I mean, that's just the nature of the beast, Like I said, I'm confused by the tools. I feel bad for anybody that has to do day-to-day operations and use the tool. But before I jump into the tool, I want to bring the cybersecurity expert in the room. Lucky, can you hear us? We can't see you, but can you hear us and can you speak?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, loud and clear, like an angel from above.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I agree with a lot of what you guys are saying, if not all. There's a lot of different areas to cover with new technology, and when it comes to cybersecurity, there comes new facets. Before we'd have testing, now we have testing with AI. But I agree. The big thing that I've seen, it's not, what problems can we solve? It's how quickly can we get AI in? Where can we put AI? Where can we use AI? But it's not really a concerted effort to just say, okay, we're trying to solve a problem. And I think that's where the big problem is. Back in the day when you were designing BI solutions, or you had data science guys, you were doing more analysis. It was more statistical analysis. But at the end, you were solving a problem.
That's right.
It's like they're too quickly to jump on the AI bandwagon, and they're not sure if they want a large language model. They're not sure if they need Jarvis. They don't know what they need, but they want it, at the end. And it's how quickly can we solve something with AI? And I'm not think that's just the wrong approach, but I'm constantly battling that every day. And at the end, you have to come down to, okay, again, I agree. As far as what makes sense to your business, what area is your business affected? Can you benefit from AI teaching you things? AI is really good at that. Before it wasn't necessarily the best thing to use. Now it's a little bit sharper, where you can use it to make informed decisions. And I think that's the best case for you with AI. You let me know what you think.
Yeah, I mean, this part, we're going to talk about business opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Because we're prepping people to talk about the business risk side of things at the end of this discussion, because that's what people should be leaving with, along with business opportunity. So me and Mike and Julian, we talked about a single business opportunity. We'll talk about that, and then we can add risk around that. So one of the reason I know, and Lucky will probably attest to that, is that the reason data is not secured because people don't find the value of data. If I knew how valuable my data was, I would not be leaving it in an open desktop, right? I'll be walking around with that desktop in my pocket or tied to my hip because You have to really understand the value of data. If you don't, it's because somebody told you how to protect those data, but didn't tell you how those aggregated data becomes a valuable proposition for attackers and future business propositions, right? So this means we're talking about business intelligence, right? Business intelligence is not necessarily something that everybody wants to talk about throughout the day, but there are some people that talk about business intelligence all day long. That's me. I have to talk about business intelligence because I have to really think of data and the value of those data for the business intelligence. You have to think about the current state of data as is and to be, right? But one of the specific tool, let's just say you didn't hear anything for next 1 hour, right? Think of this. Your business intelligence, what used to cost you so much money, and one thing that you wouldn't do for the last 10 years on your business intelligence, you can do today by just having a $20 subscription. It's a little bit of harder work, but you can do it with $20 subscription. And we'll talk about this $20 subscription later. But the tool here that we're talking about is to start developing your business intelligence documents. Because in CMC, we can talk about documents too, right? We know how hard that is. Nobody wants to do that. But that's compliance. That's in the radius. If you can imagine creating single document that serves as your master document, that does your CMC documentation, that does your HR documentation, that does your documentation for ARAPs, account receivable, account payables, you want that master document. And this master document, nobody can create unless you are creating it, unless you are the one that's committing to saying on a daily basis, well, for a certain amount of days, you will create this master document that will serve as a standard operating procedures, like as an AI brain. You're creating this brain, and this brain does not take subscription from this guy and that guy. It literally, you can build it yourself. That's the power of AI. I'm talking about something that people spend hundreds of millions of dollars in ERPs. All of a sudden, you as a business owner can develop this only on a ChatGPT or Claude or other systems that you're using, right? But I heard Julian as well jump in on that.
No, you hit a couple of good points, right? So number one is assessing data readiness, right? So that conversation does need to be had, right? Hey, is our data ready? Because what's the age-old adage, garbage in, garbage out? A lot of concerns around the use of AI is what? Hallucinations, fallacies, not getting the right information, making sure that you still have the human in the loop to validate and verify that data. But at the ground level, right, you can get more tactical than say, hey, let's make a concerted effort to ensure that we assess the data readiness, right? Because it needs inputs, right? Is the documentation organized? How do we get started? How do we organize that documentation? Those are the kinds of questions I get asked quite a bit that very easily can overwhelm somebody. So if you take a small veteran-owned business or an SDV OSB of some sort that's been in the federal contracting space for the past 5 to 10 years, they've got approximately hundreds, if not thousands, of proposals that they've written over that time frame, right? Hitch, what are your thoughts? Is that assessment pretty accurate? I don't know the actual numbers, but
yeah, man. I mean, and just to your point, I think the amount of information that's in those documents, and even if you look at it from a longitudinal perspective, right? You put those things on a timeline. Yeah. You'll see the improvement of those documents over time, right? And so, do you want to take the ones that you did when you first started out as a company, or you want to take the ones that you did in the last 5 years, right? Yeah. But you're right. I mean, there's a whole lot of data that is sitting there. I think, Asa brought up a good point a couple of minutes ago about business intelligence. There's a cultural component to this too, right? We have a couple of generations that privacy has pretty much been out the door. I mean, they're willing to give up that free data. So they don't see data the same way that, probably you and I saw data when we were growing up and trying to protect social security numbers and those sort of things, right? I mean, these kids are posting anything and everything today. So there's a cultural component of this, which I think that's going to shift over time because we're already seeing it in our culture with like NIL, right? People are starting to realize that, hey, my name, image, and likeness has value, right? And so people are going to transition that to, hey, these documents that I'm producing for company X, Y, and Z, that has some value to it. So how do I maintain that value, not only as an individual, but how do I maintain that value as a company, as an organization?
And the other thing to that is so the data readiness, and then, hey, is it interoperable, right? Because some of the tools that are being built out, everybody's about proprietary. Hey, this is my widget. How do I protect it to make sure that we can keep the revenue coming in? So is ensuring that piece of it is like, all right, how much do we actually want out there, and is it going to be interoperable? Because as we've seen again over the past 6 to 12 months, it's changing very rapidly on, hey, this is the next tool that we should be using, or here's how we should be implementing.
I think the challenge with when you're thinking about a business and how they're going to use the information is, hey, I got all these great AI tools out here, how we should be using these, how should we use those? I think you got to step back and think about, in order to accomplish what, right? And at the end of the day, you want to have your business so you're becoming more competitive, right? How do you gain a competitive advantage? And if you look at your business model, in what areas can you gain a competitive advantage in that competitive space by leveraging a tool? Maybe it's an AI tool, maybe it's not an AI tool, right? But at the end of the day, if you're not looking at your business model, if you don't understand your competition, then just putting something in the sauce isn't necessarily going to get you the outcome that you're looking for, unless you really understand the reason behind it and how it's going to improve your ability to compete and win.
And everything you guys are saying is spot on, because when you're talking about this markdown markdown file, that, as I said, you can build it yourself. Like right now, you can jump off of this podcast and go and say, like, how do I do a markdown file for myself? You don't want to push yourself to JSON, because JSON becomes very technical over time. But the markdown language is literally you putting information on a document that any and everybody can read on a human language, but any and every AI, which quote unquote is AI, is a large language model that can say, I see a text and I'm going to read that text and I'm going to make sense of what's being said on this text. All of a sudden, that markdown file becomes your core of business. Previously, 10 years ago, I think the reason people didn't do it is because it was so hard to do. Because if you think about it from a ledger perspective, you write ledger, but all of a sudden this one changes. You don't do anything because you're like, man, I got to rewrite on top of that because I have to keep going down to the bottom of the Excel sheet, right? Bottom of the rows and columns. But because of this markdown file, you can write, say, you take a 30-day challenge. You write everything for the last 30 days. All of a sudden, you want to go back and say, matter of fact, you don't even need to go back to read it. It's a markdown file that you never have to look at, right? You can go back and tell a large language model, like, well, day 2, I mentioned my business name is Awesome Business, right? Now it's super bad. No, like it's Super Awesome Business, right? That's a movie. Super Awesome Business. I just want to change it. So from day 2 on, for last 28 days, it's going to go and fix all of that. Power of this markdown file, I cannot emphasize, because all it needs is you to use a large language model, or you to use a chatbot, or you to use that quote unquote AI, right? Because that's the kind of capability that 10 years ago we didn't have. If you had this capability 10 years ago, businesses that are doing exit today will be far more valued than what they're right now. And Mike, you can back me up on that. I think that's the reality, is that businesses that will exit 5 years from now, 5 months from now, or 10 years from now, that single markdown file will evaluate you in a higher level than anybody else's, because you have a core business intelligence that looks like the whole spine of the business. Yeah. And everybody can see it and everybody can feel it. Let me stop there.
So, dude, one thing you said, people are not ready for the max exodus of baby boomers that are getting ready to leave their businesses, right?
Succession.
Because it is, so it is a large number that entire baby boomer generation went out, entrepreneurial spirit, started all kinds of businesses. And we have that today, but I think there was a gap in there where it was like, all right, hey, work hard, stay at a company 25 years, get the golden Rolex, make sure you retire, you get your pension, and you're good. And then at some point in time, it shifted. And now you've got all these entrepreneurs and all these businesses starting. But there is going to be a shift in paradigm from that. So very interesting that you brought that particular topic up.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I mean, I think particularly for these solopreneurs that are coming out, I mean, that generation has realized that old model is no longer there, right? So they are more entrepreneurial in nature. They're willing to take on the risk, they will work for themselves. The challenge is how do they scale that, right? And so again, if you looked at the signals that you were seeing even within the federal government from a policy perspective, what did they start doing policy-wise to start tapping into some of that money, right? They started looking at these 1099s and saying, hey, anything over $600, if you don't get a 1099 for it, you're going to be in trouble, because they realize there's going to be a lot of off the book revenue that's being generated because there's a shift in the market where people are taking on, side hustles and all those other sort of things. So the government wants to get their hands on some of those dollars. So I think the real question becomes, how do we take that and kind of scale to help those solopreneurs and some of those other, entrepreneurs that are really thinking hard about how they can scale their businesses, and not just scale it in one particular space, but create multiple enterprises, right, across a number of different domains. Because quite frankly, I think that's going to be, we already know that small businesses are the engine of the U.S. economy, but how do we continue to generate that and spread that throughout the next couple of generations?
Lucky, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. So Lucky, I think we talked about this before, but Julian and Mike is literally hitting that point about interoperability and scalability, right? So any use case that anybody's talking about today, say some example, somebody who really knows everything about AI, knows a lot about technology, comes to you and say, here's your use case, right? Go and do it because everybody else is doing it. So I say, stop. That's neighbor Jones's problem. You do not take any use case that's thrown at you, and you think like, oh, it will work out just fine for me, right? So one of the tests is, we talked about Pastel earlier. That's your analysis. But as you're going through day-to-day grind, one of the things that I would recommend that you always keep in mind as people are throwing use cases at you is KISS. Remember, keep it simple and stupid. That's DevOps. That's 15, 20 years ago, KISS, right? Yep. But now for AI, you're going to have to do something different, which is KISS. Keep it interoperable, scalable, and sustainable. If you cannot answer those three things right off the bat, interoperability means not tomorrow, not 5 months from now, in 5 years, what happens to this tool that I'm buying right now, right? You can categorize it. You can give it some points to say, this tool, I might use it for 6 months, but within 6 months, I'm going to have to get off of it, right? Interoperability, scalability, and sustainability, right? If you look at that markdown file, that is just something that you can scale to nobody's business. I'm talking about multiple folders with segmented information, all having their own little markdown files where the information is just being inserted to the files and folders automatically as you're speaking on the Zoom call, right? So this scalability means that using these folders from the markdown files, you can have an HR AI that doesn't know anything about you. All of a sudden, that reads a markdown file says, oh, I cannot screw this up because the instructions are literally written line by line. This is the resume of the person that I need. This is a job posting that needs to go out. Agents are going to read these files and they're not going to be able to, what did I skip that word? You said it earlier, but hallucinate. Agents cannot hallucinate because of this large language model problem, because the instructions are written in such a way that you cannot escape it, right? Sustainability, can you sustain it? I talked about it already. If it's a 30-day-old document, 300-day-old document, 3,000-day-old documents, you can always go back and change your company name for last 3,000 days and it will sustain itself. You don't have to go and delete everything and have somebody do a Control F and Control Replace, right? We're not talking about that. KISS, keep it interoperable, scalable, and sustainable. But before I let Lucky and everybody else jump in, I want to answer this question. What historical event led us here? Well, one of the things is that the hardware component, right? Because your devices, right? When we talk about hardware, we always tend to think about like devices and servers and data racks, right? These hardwares were really hard to control, right? So the data kind of went with it. Data went everywhere with it. And the data traveled around the globe, right? So before I even said anything about Zoom, somebody else out in the world heard it, right? So these data that is really hard to control is where we start giving away data because we got frustrated by controlling those data. How many days can you go on talking about, I'm going to protect my social security from somebody who really, really wants it?
Yeah.
You just can't. That's just not something sustainable. So yeah, I think we did let go of our privacy.
I think that was part of it, but I think there's another component to that as well, right? I think the other component is subscription services. It's a business model, right? That initial business model where, hey, subscribe to this, you get it for free.
Yeah, freemium.
And you signed up, and within that agreement, you agree to give away your data.
Yeah.
Right. And that just kind of continued to be the thing, right? And we're still seeing it with Facebook. We're seeing it with, you name it. You name the subscription model that isn't out there that isn't taking some of your data.
If it's free, you're the product. Right?
Exactly.
You're not using the product. They're using you.
I mean, if you look at why, and to your point about hardware, if you look at why televisions are so cheap, it isn't just because the manufacturing costs dropped. It's because they're capturing a whole lot of data now from you being able to scroll through there, and there's a whole lot of data collection going on, right? So there's a price for cheap goods as well.
Yeah.
Hey, so this is a perfect segue, right? Because I want to go back to your KISS from earlier, right? I want to add one more S to it, right? Security. Kisses, yeah. Kisses, right? But you got to add the security aspect to it, especially if you're in the GovCon space, right? Because with CMMC and all these and FedRAMP and everything else, the big question is that we got to ask ourselves, hey, if my data is touching an AI tool, or my data is touching the interweb, right? The World Wide Web, where is my data going? Because some of those tools and some of those, various platforms, and some of those platforms right away, that's a CMMC violation without us even realizing or knowing that, hey, I just committed something. And again, for the technology companies, they may be a little bit more up to speed, but you've got some labor forces out there that are not as technically savvy, and they don't realize how quickly they can be dinged for a CMMC violation. And I don't know if Lucky has any background or knowledge on, on that side of the house, but that's going to be very interesting to see kind of, hey, what are the retention policies? How does my data actually get parceled out? Where's it go?
No, I've run into it quite a bit. It's one of those things where it's like everybody has a great idea, this great new tool. It has all this great information, and at the end, there has to be a discussion, and people need to know the difference between having a model that you build in house that's part of your architecture, that's part of your that has your security model, your data, and then you have just large language models that are there to for the public and for anyone in the gov sector or anyone that's working not so much in the gov sector also, but anyone that works for a corporation. When you're using these models and you're going to, and I love these models too, don't get me wrong, I teach.
Don't you say anything about Claude, all right?
You know what, hey, I can't even talk about Claude because I work in the government space. So now I've been Claude's been like the lost book of the Bible. Like the lost book of the Bible is gone, my friend. And so without getting, but like I do like Claude. I do like Olama. I've taught stable diffusion. I teach cybersecurity outside the government. My thing is I love technology, and what I see is that there people even this, and I can't really go into the too many details, but even the smartest of individuals that you would figure these guys, they've got maybe a doctor's degree. They got, they work in a very high, and all of a sudden they're pushing products like, and I'm not saying it's a bad product, but perplexity. And there's products that you use at home, and there's products that you use for learning, and then there's products you do not use in the government space. And I've had to shut the book on certain things. I'm like, hey guys, yeah, it's great, I know, but not here. Use this at home in your own studies. But you start to give away a lot of your secret sauce, a lot of what you're doing internal. People like to take meeting notes and run the meeting notes um, through through AI, and I mean it's just not smart. It doesn't make business sense, and you're starting to, at that point, there's higher levels of risk when you start exchanging information, and so yeah, I've seen it quite a bit in the security space, and it's one of those things where you try to guide people. Okay, this is the safe, like anything else. Okay, this is our internal. This is what we're building. This is our safe spot, like a sandbox. This is where you play. This stuff is not any good, and then you got to start building security controls around it. All right, so now we block these URLs. Because a big percentage of this is real easy. It's 443 traffic. You're accessing. They're not creating a whole new way of communicating. I mean, there could be encrypted tunnels in some cases, but very often it's just 443 traffic. You're just going to websites, so it becomes really easy to build security controls around a lot of AI tools that people are hitting external. It's just trying to prevent them from downloading desktop tools, because those set up persistent connections. But again, it's a struggle. It's a struggle trying to make sure, as a security guy, making sure that you're trying to protect the large population. Say, hey, yeah, so AI is fantastic. I support it. I love it. But we got to go through this with some caution. Some things aren't just meant for work at the end of the day.
Yeah, this is perfectly the conversations that we're going to have to just peel the onions on and cry about it, right? It's boring. It's probably not that satisfactory to everybody. But the question here that the Dr. Baresi brought up is that how do we upskill at scale? I can guarantee you nobody will care as long as you don't care about what they know. If you don't know what they know, if you cannot do a gap assessment of what they know, no matter how much they know, it's not upskilling for the team, right? You really have to be able to say, we have to do a gap assessment here. And I'm going to jump in specifically what Lucky was talking about, right? We've had shadow IT for last 30 years. Guys, it's nothing new. So when I say shadow AI, that's not going to be anything new for you at all, because you know about shadow IT. Now you have shadow AI as a problem, right? You have to start asking questions, because now people will say, for example, most of the time when we walk into a room, this side of the room, somebody wants to build a robot. And this side of the room, there's a PhD guy who just wants to fix his Excel sheet. Two different kind of personality, two different kind of conversation. They do not talk to each other. So when you're upskilling them, you have to baseline all of them, because if they don't understand the baseline, they're going to wreck your business in so many different levels, right? And I'll tell you why. Because this guy that wants robot, he's going to think about hardwares all day long. This guy that's thinking about the Excel sheet, they're both okay, because you're going to use robots sooner than later. But you have to keep using Excel sheet for today and in the future, right? Because you have to have your ledgers. You have the rows and columns. So your different mentality of shadow AI really have to be baselined, right? So you have to upskill everybody all at once. It's not a choice. That's the only way you can do it. Now, let me tell you why.
Yeah.
If you want to push somebody about shadow AI, they're going to say, I'm going to try to get around that, right? Because these AIs are so easy. It doesn't really take my brain process that much, right? I don't have to brainstorm with myself. What if I, instead of taking the notes, I kind of asked it the questions about, like, how should I answer these things, brainstorming, right? Think about from perspective of a hacker or an attacker. Do they know that they want to hack you? That's the first thing they do. They identify you, and they label you up to the levels of, can I attack this person, or can I attack this person and work my way up to this person, right? Mm-hmm. If you think about shadow AI, one of the things that your employees probably are not familiar with, which is called PI, which stands for pre-internet encryption. So they're thinking that, oh, this is all encrypted data. It's going to leave my device, go to another device. If I'm sending somebody a message, nobody's going to see it. But guess what? Your encryption starts from the device by the time you sent the sent button, right?
Yep.
So anything before that, somebody can read your screen. This is AI generation. This is the AI age. You have to know these little things, that somebody can read your screen even though you think nobody's reading your screen, because you probably gave somebody an access to your screen reading. And I'll give you a perfect example of it. If you have allowed some of the Instagram filters to get on your computer or get on your phone, one of the things that they ask you, like, can I have access to your photos?
Yeah.
And you will say, yeah, go ahead and access to the photos. That's fine, because I'm going to take the photos there and put them on Instagram. Well, not all of them are so simple and so innocent, right? Some of them took the permission to go through your pictures to look for the screenshots of your credit card, screenshots of your passport. Pictures, like literally, that's what we do, right? We look at the pictures, and AI looks at the picture, and AI knows exactly what credit card looks like, and it will start taking those information and start throwing them back to wherever the app was generated. These apps are nothing secure just because they're coming from App Store like Google and Apple, right? So your shadow AI, you really have to emphasize it. But you cannot tell everybody this information I just shared with you, because not everybody's going to pick it up. Not everybody's going to care. But you have to care enough to say, everybody here needs to have a baseline of AI, also a baseline about our business. Baseline for our business means totally different something than a baseline of AI, because everybody can go to Coursera, everybody can go to Udemy, YouTube, MIT for 8 weeks, UT Austin for 19 weeks, learn about AI, come back. They have no idea how to apply that to your business. So when I say everybody has to be upskilled about AI, you have to do it as a team, because as a team, you can learn AI for your business. There's no point of learning about AI if you're not going to use it in your business. This is just all about your business. You have to upskill together as a team. So I hope that kind of answered the questions, because that is the questions that I love answering, because people are like, oh yeah, we're just going to sign up for a digital content where we're going to sit there and passively learn about AI, right? And nobody does anything with it afterwards. Data still gets leaked. Data still gets stolen. Problems are still there.
We're big fans, right? So we're big fans because we believe that, hey, look, AI can accelerate, right? AI can accelerate certain functions, documentation, certain updates, flow down tracking for some of the subcontractor stuff that we do. But then there's also the risks that it creates, right? Especially when you're talking about the cloud-based processing, right? And especially kind of how you said, hey, look, and I think it's a little bit in the younger generations, right? They're starting to learn the impact, but once you get into certain fields and within certain organizations, it's like, hey, do you understand what CUI is and the impact that it can have? It's just not information that flows out freely, so much so that the new CMMC regulations say, hey, look, even CUI is at a need-to-know basis, right? Control the dissemination as much as possible. But there's a lot of great use cases. And then for the rest too, the retention, right? We don't know how long the information, the data is being retained for and where. So there's a lot of different impacts that it has, to your point.
Yeah. And risk-wise, one of the things that I've learned over time is that you cannot, live without risk, but you have to accept some of the risk and manage most of the other ones, right? You have to accept some of them. You just have to accept it. There's no point in trying to solve this problem called cybersecurity, because cybersecurity is not a problem. It's just a way of doing business. It's not a problem. There's no solution for it. Data is going to be out in exposure. Data is going to get leaked. Data is going to be, you just have to reduce the attack surface. You have to reduce that amount of leaks. That's all you can do, right? Now, as we're speaking of the risk, one of the things that AI specifically brings to the game is that your data, how it gets attacked, right? So one of the pieces that everybody knows about is social engineering. But let me just tell everybody about OpenClaw. Because if you have heard about OpenClaw and you said, wow, I'm missing out and I don't feel normal because everybody else is using OpenClaw, I'm not. please do yourself a favor. Don't touch OpenClaw. All right. There's going to be two groups of people in 5 years from now without OpenClaw. One is going to be not winning because they lost all their data, right? The other one is going to win because they didn't win. They didn't use OpenClaw, right? That's how I feel about OpenClaw. Now you know. but the risk part of it, the OpenClaw part of it, is something that you really have to start thinking about agents, right? Because OpenClaw is an agent, right? OpenClaw is not just a single agent, but agents for everything you want to populate. However, don't fall for it. It's a scam. It's a hype. It doesn't exist that way. If you really want agents, you're going to have to build it on your own. You have to build it just the way everybody else is doing, which is with safety and security and privacy in mind. But these agents are always going to have access to the information. And when they get manipulated, let's say, for example, you're not paying attention to one of your agents, and these agents are being prompt injected to do some harm on your data, you really have to start thinking about your data differently, right? What data is really valuable that is core of my business, core of everything I do? I know we've done that with IT already because we've developed our network. But now that we're allowing agents as employees to have access to this data, you really have to start kind of shifting towards that kind of mindset. It's not about just IAM anymore, right? Access management of individuals. You're giving agents access management. There's protocols that are agent-to-agent conversations that are happening. So I want to add that to the risk because these are the type of questions that we start have to frame the conversation around, right? Because like we're seeing AI, but we're not really labeling it correctly. We have to start identifying the right AI, why we have to label it, and what sort of decisions we have to make off of that labeling.
Yeah. So let me ask you guys this. From your perspective, where do you think that small business owners that are not as well versed and not as technically savvy within the space, where do they go wrong in trying to adopt AI into their business to say, hey, look, I want to win?
Wow, that's a good question. I think that adopting AI is just looking at it is always going to be a plus, right? That's the first step. But like you said, there's different types of AI that you need to look at, depending on what you're doing. Like one part is how do you market your business better? You can use artificial intelligence to help you if you're not market savvy, if you're not computer savvy, you can use it to educate you. That's one piece. But the more of what he's leaning towards is where you start to reduce your workforce by using agentic AI services. And that's what I'm seeing a lot of now too, is they're starting to, the building of agentic AI and having that do a lot of your human functions that you would have. And it can carry out decision makings. It can carry out a decision tree. It can reach out outside of your environment or your perimeter and reach out into the cloud. It can reach out to other data for purposeful, whatever it has to do, make decisions. Like we'll just say, like, just give you an example. We could have an AI that tracks the weather for a specific location or locations. And if that AI sees, bad weather, then it prepares, maybe disaster recovery solutions for maybe the fire department. But it starts to prepare things where before you had a human person there. Now it can monitor different things, track different things, and now you don't necessarily have to have a human. And these new agentic AI solutions, that's the future. That's purpose. That they are purpose-built, purposeful agents, AI solutions that are not just a language model. That's not just a chat bot. That's not just making you feel like you're talking to somebody. It's something that's fulfilling a purpose and can make decisions. And I think that's the future. If you can model that and use those type of agentic AI solutions to work with your business, I think that's where you need to be. That's the future.
And I think you still have to kind of expand out a little bit and again take a look at that overall business model to see where you can gain a competitive advantage, right? I think everyone is going to be focused on how they can get that workforce reduced. That's where a lot of your big cost comes, You take a look at your cost structure, it's in labor, right? So that's going to be the first place people are going to look. But where else, whether it's a business intelligence piece, whether it's, we talk about the OODA loop, on the military side, how fast you can make decisions within an environment to get a competitive advantage from, the folks in your market. So some of this has to go back to, I think, taking a look at that business model, understanding your competitive environment, and figuring out where you can leverage that technology to really take an advantage. And I'm not sure we're there yet. And we're seeing that on the modern day battlefield, right? We're seeing, we bring all this, huge amounts of military technology and power to the battle space, but still that doesn't necessarily ensure that you're going to have a decisive win. There's folks that are attacking things from an asymmetric position. And I think business is no different. You can't go where everyone else is going. You have to look at some asymmetry, figure out where you can get a competitive advantage. If that's using certain AI tools, then so be it.
I gotta follow up with this thought process here, because you're just putting it just the way it needs to be put. But before I do that, I want to acknowledge, I know, Mike, you are Marine, and Julian, Army, right?
Nope, Julian's Marine.
Oh,
Julian's Marine. So let me tell you why. I'm an Air Force guy, and every time I see a Marine, I just say, thank you for your service, because if you didn't do it, I would have to do it. So thank you for your service, guys. All right.
Well, we appreciate it. Thank you.
hey, no, seriously, thank you for your service.
Just keep the airspace free.
Yeah.
Now we got Space Force. We got to keep the satellites free.
Yeah, exactly.
But
well, there you go. Changes in the domain. Yeah.
One of the things that I think we're talking into right now is what we talked about with Pastel earlier, right? And we talked about business intelligence. But let's talk about what everybody has to do, no matter what the size is, right? Everybody has to do that KISS, keep it interoperable, scalable, and sustainable. But you also have to do the SWOT analysis, right? Your strength, weakness, and opportunities and threats. Because if you do it from that perspective, all of a sudden you come up with another acronym, which is the SMART. Can you achieve it? Can you do anything with this? This is measurable. Can you put a timeline behind it, right? These are all the stuff that is baseline basics that always been here. But just because of AI does not mean we do things differently now, right? You just have to do it faster. You just have to do that SWOT analysis faster. You have to be able to do that KISS faster. You have to do that understanding the use case that brings that security vulnerability faster. Ask those questions to the ChatGPT. Ask those questions to Claude. They will give you a far more bullet points than I can ever come up with my own, right? On that point, the biggest winner in AI space right now, as of right now, in the adoption-wise, is the small businesses. So when you ask Julian about the small businesses, they're the fastest adopter of artificial intelligence, because the paradigm is shifting to now everything is kind of getting equalized, where you can run a 500-man shop or you can run a 500-agent shop, right? And the output could be similar. So they're already talking about a one-man IPO that's coming up soon, right? Just a one-man that has 500 agents working on his behalf. It does not negate all of the stuff that I just said, right? Like SWOT analysis, Pastel, your BI as your core of your business, your BI for succession, BI for just running your markdown file. You have to do those basic, simple things. That never changes, right? So as the business grow, just like enterprises will grow, as the business grow, how do you keep accountability? How do you keep your vulnerabilities at bay, right? How do you manage and accept those risks, right? These simple things that we have to put a lot of brain power into, I think now we can start having artificial intelligence to do that with us, right? I think that's the key word here. It has to be with us, not necessarily outsource it to them, right? We're not outsourcing anything, not anymore. If you're using AI, it's more like you're working with an AI, because you are far more dangerous because you're working with AI versus somebody who's still using that same, I'm going to put everything on my brain and just have myself do all the work in my brain, right? If you're not putting it down on the chat bot somewhere, and if you're not writing those SOPs down in your business intelligence, you are not taking advantage of this full AI ecosystems. So if you're a small business thinking like, we're pretty much all AI, yes, up to a certain point, but not all of it, right? Now is a chance to actually expand on that, because the codings are so much easier to do. People that I used to talk to, I always say like, look, you're working on text-to-text model. I want you to move up to text-to-code model, Because if you start text to code model, all of a sudden you realize why you didn't code all of your life, and all of a sudden now you're coding. So if you're a startup, text to text is here. Everybody does that. But if you go text to code, all of a sudden you know exactly how powerful AI can get, because it will teach you and work you through all those codes that otherwise would cost $10,000, $15,000 and 1 year wait period, right? But I think that's a lot of information for 1 hour discussion. And before we go off, I want to go back and talk to you guys about what it is that you do, right? Give us a rundown of where your experience have been, and that experience, how are you using that in the AI age? Because Mike, we talked about Apex Accelerator, SCORE, and business mentorship. Julian, me and you talk about drones all day long, right? Give us your experience. Give us your experience that you are using AI to make your experience that much better.
I can tell you, I've just recently started using it for acquisition forecast. You start pulling down acquisition forecast files and start taking a look at the structures of organizations, start understanding who the competitors are that are within that space, who's being awarded the contracts, help you find a entry point for a particular company, help you figure out where, if you take some of that information and link it to whether it's LinkedIn or different job boards to find out where there's some demand for certain skill sets, which might be showing market gaps for certain small companies that are having a hard time filling high demand, low density billets. It will quickly identify where there might be an entry point for a small company coming into the space. So there's all sorts of use cases that you can use for it, using scenarios, using in strategic foresight, using it to run multiple scenarios for where we think the government might be heading in a certain sector for the next 12 to 18 months, based on pulling down some of their strategic plans, looking at their strategic plans, looking at some of the policy decisions that are being talked about, not only through the White House, but also where Congress is heading with some of the legislation that's out there. So being able to really pull in a lot of that data to get a quick picture of, hey, this is what's actually happening in that external environment without taking 6 to 8 hours to read through those documents has been really useful.
Love that.
So we're using it and we're leveraging it to try to make our business processes faster, to try to become more efficient. So kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, right? Creating a 500 agent type of organization with a sole individual. Well, we don't think that removing workforce is the answer. It's hey, how do I build efficiency, right? So how do I take what this full-time employee that here's his fully burdened rate, right? And then multiply that by, hey, how many hours were we able to build efficiency into it, right? So for example, doing research on, hey, what should we be paying somebody, right? Being able to quickly take all of that data, bring it in from multiple sources and consolidate it and synthesize, say, hey, here for this particular market, here's going rate for these labor categories or these skill sets, right? Yeah. Allowing us to save ourselves 10, 15 times of having a data analyst go on to salary.com, input, hey, I need an IT professional senior. What is, this zip code? And here's the 50th, 75th, and 90th percentile. Yeah. Being able to rapidly do things like that. Some of the marketing stuff, workflow automation in those. So slowly beginning to inject it into, hey, what are quick, easy, small wins that as a business owner, we can really get to have an impact that reduces the burden and the overload on one of our individuals doing that. So they can focus on the stuff that requires a little bit more brain power, a little bit more critical thinking.
Yeah. And Julian, I was even thinking about, one of the areas we spent a lot of time was past performance citations. I mean, being able to take a PWS and then link that to your previous PWSs, previous contracts, and line up past performance, get that alignment in there and have that thing write it for you almost to perfection, which used to take you hours to do. Mm-hmm. That can now do it literally in several seconds. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you guys are pointing out working with AI has its benefits, right? But working with AI in a sustainable, scalable way is where the benefits come from. So you're actually shifting the culture more towards that BI conversation along with AI. And the greatest way I've ever heard BI explained was that BI gives you lots of options because that's what it's presenting, a lot of data with option. But AI gives you that answer because it's using those options and data to give you the answers you need, right? But also because we're talking about AI, what's next? It's cognitive intelligence, it's decision making, right? Because if you have cognitive intelligence, now you can execute based on those options and answers, right? So agents are making that happen as we speak, but we slowly are outsourcing our decision making to these agents. Just to give you an example, I'm not talking about something futuristics here. We're not watching a movie over here. This is a real life where agent-to-agent protocol is a protocol now that is made by Google. So previously it was just agent-to-agent interaction, but nowadays it's payment methods between two agents. Two agents can make payment. They can make the decisions to pay something from your credit card, from your purchase order, or something like that, right? Invoices it can be paid through the agent-to-agent protocol for payments. So yeah, we're really moving into the world where we're going to work with AI, and I think that's the sentiment we have to build. That let's outsource as much as we can, but also let's be careful what we outsource.
I think too the user is an important component of this, right? So I remember sitting in staff meetings, and you'd have a couple of general officers that would come in, and you're sitting in a meeting all day trying to figure out a real hard problem. Whether it's a senior colonel or a general officer that walks in, one question, right? That totally changes the trajectory of that meeting because of his experience, his background, his context. So again, that tool, depending on where your experience level is and the information, the questions you're putting in, it's going to differ greatly in terms of the capabilities that you're going to be able to leverage from it. So the tool can't do everything. It still has to have some folks there that have some context and really understand how to leverage the capabilities that are inherent in that particular tool.
So what I hear you guys say is the fog of war, right? So we use the tool to kind of clear away some of the fog of war that allows us to make those decisions, right? Those decisions that need to be made much faster, more efficiently. And that's kind of how we're looking at it is, hey, how do we clear through the noise a little bit faster, more effectively, more efficiently to get to that business result that we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think that's a great analogy. Just getting rid of some of that noise, because there's a whole lot of noise that's out there, right? How do you sort through that noise? Yeah,
that's Julian's next book, Fog of War Using AI. But guys, it's been an amazing conversation. Stick around. I'm going to end the stream here. But thank you guys for what you do, because this is one of the powerful methods of podcasts is that we have to share knowledge. And through us, we enable other people to say, I had that knowledge, but nobody validated that knowledge. Now somebody had, right? And if the perspective shifts from that validation, I think this 1 hour worth of conversation is $1 million for me, right? So thank you all. Stick around, and AI is out.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.